I know that it's our Halloween episode, but I promise not to do my spooky voice at the opening because I know you get tired of it.
You're lying to me.
Hello and welcome to the Halloween episode of Center of Weirdness, the weird podcast about very weird stuff, but mostly weird TV episodes. Also, I forgot to call it Center of Spookiness.
You're an awful person.
Happy Halloween, everybody. I'm Josh, and with me as always is Skinner. Hey, Skinner.
Go to hell.
It is Halloween. We are recording this only a few days before the high holy holiday, and we couldn't think of a better show to cover for Halloween, but Freddy's Nightmares. We are back to talk about Freddy's Nightmares. We had so much fun on the last episode, and this one might even be crazier than that one.
Turns out season 2, they don't even give a shit anymore. Like, they don't even try to make it about Freddy Krueger.
No, they don't. So basically, we can make this promise. We will cover probably every episode of this show because every plot description of every episode is utter lunacy. Like, we went through, we looked at a couple of them. There is apparently a specific Halloween episode that we thought about covering, but then we read about this episode, Memory Overload, which did air on October 30th, 1989. So technically this was their Halloween episode for season 2. And we couldn't not cover it because it sounded insane. And it is insane, and it makes no sense.
So apparently what we've realized from watching 2 episodes, and this may not be consistent, but I'm guessing it is that the characters introduced in the first act, one of the minor characters will be the star of the second act.
Yes.
They do this in this episode. However, they don't do any legwork to make a consistent character.
They do not. Like, the character that we meet in the first segment in this episode is very sort of meek and like kind and kind of opposed to shitty people. And then in the second segment where she is the main character, she is a piece of shit. So I don't know what is going on with this.
I saw one episode recap. I was trying to figure out, did I remember wrong? Is this a different character who happens to have the same haircut? Because she does change her hairstyle halfway through the second part.
Sure.
But no, this starts off. There's Barbara. She says exactly what her job is in the second part. But I was reading a recap just before I rewound, and someone just literally, one of the recaps literally says, in part 2, Barbara, who is a bitch. Like, wow, this is from a GeoCities level page, so that apparently it's really easier just to call a woman character in episode a bitch. But god damn, this episode hits the ground fucking running, and it doesn't stop.
Yeah, it's weird. I think, but I to your earlier point, I think you are right. I think that somewhere in the second season, they must have decided that we're just going to do this as like a fun kind of spooky anthology type show, and Freddy Krueger is not really going to be that involved because, I mean, maybe we're wrong. Maybe we just happened to pick a weird outlier of an episode, but like, It seems like the first episode of season 2 does have something to do with Freddy Krueger. Like it does.
I mean, if you
something because he's mentioned in the description. In this one, he's not part of the story at all. He shows up to do the little intro about the whole stories, and then that's it. And then he's not involved in any way.
If you hit the ground running in season 2 of Freddy's Nightmare and didn't make it about Freddy's at all, no Freddy's whatsoever, no Fredericks, no Freds, you're doing something wrong. But this also has less interstitials than the first episode we watched.
Yeah, there aren't as many, like, there are no like home improvement wipes with Freddy's glove cutting across the screen, sadly.
Boom, 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 do, bitch.
I knew where that was going, but I was going to let you finish.
Thank you.
I mean, the second episode of the second season is about fucking Elvis. So, like,
I mean, we've talked in the past while doing episodes on movies about 80s and 90s things. You had to do an Elvis episode of everything. I don't know what it was, but like we were so fucking sure in the 90s, especially in late 80s, that Elvis was still alive, and you had to reference that if you did a show that ran more than 14 episodes. Like it's unbelievable. You had to do a Bigfoot episode, and you had to do an episode about Elvis. There was no way around. It's contractual, and you had to have a character who either sounded like Peter Lorre or Jerry Lewis.
But yeah, okay. So let's start with the first segment, which is about Professor Wyndham, a professor at a community college, I think, because there's a big mix of people at this university. He says that it's Springwood U. But like there is a vast array of ages in this classroom, which makes me wonder: is it like it feels like a community college class, but maybe there's just two grandmas who are taking college classes for the first time?
It's weird because we have one character who is the horny one who says she's taking this course because she's not an English major, which means she's a full-time student, or she's not just there for a evening course.
Sure.
But she is in science, and the problem is she's horny for every science professor she's ever met, which is no one ever is. That's not a thing. But she's never gotten it, damp for an English professor ever, which is literally the opposite of literally every movie about people wanting to hump professors, which was a genre which, looking back on it, and even at the time, should have been incredibly creepy. Written by people who probably were English professors. But Barbara says she's only taking this one class because she loves Shakespeare, which we'll learn again later on, just to tie these things together.
Uh-huh.
But it is an odd conversation to have. And I'm thinking, this is a really stilted conversation, very weird, open to this episode. And then we see a man who is visibly very drunk, who looks like a bargain bin James Wood, and maybe like James Branch, and he is visibly guzzling drinks, hard liquor in class, and starts to hit on the woman in front of him. What happens from there?
Well, okay, so he's like, I thought it was going to be one of those things because you could tell where it's going, but like he immediately comes in and he's like this guy is very much acting drunk. And so I thought it was like, oh, this is some sort of weird act. Or it's going to be like it's the extreme version of those things that you've seen in other shows where it's like the guy comes in and he's like, oh, I've heard the professor of this class is a real asshole. And then the student's like, oh yeah, me too. I heard he sucked big time. And then he stands up and goes, welcome to class, everybody. And then those kids feel stupid. It's basically that, except that he starts hitting on this woman and then talking about Shakespeare and then digs into her eyes.
Digs into her eyes and pulls
blood
them
goes
out.
everywhere.
Yeah, blood everywhere. He's got eyeballs in each hand.
Yes, he's holding up eyes and everyone's freaked out and screaming, which you would do.
You would do. And in any case, no matter how, if you would, do what he does and like, this is acting. Shakespeare is about feeling and believing, and thanks to this member of the theater department for
yes,
like no like. Regardless if he had tenure or not, the fucking school is sued. It's over.
It's a wild thing to do. Like you would not. There's no way that you would do this. Like this would not be allowed.
Like maybe in '87, but like today, be like, it's not as impactful as walking up to a blackboard and writing "God is dead" and then making everybody sign a fucking waiver about it. Because that actually happens in school if you ask the people who believe anything, and are very upset about the things that did not happen. But
there was no Green Beret there to punch him out.
Could you like within seconds of this happening, somebody will pull their cell phone out and start filming it.
Yeah. It's so wild. So then he stands up and immediately starts talking about Shakespeare and how he knew that you needed to grab audiences' attention and like do all this stuff. And the two women in the class, the redhead, what is her name? Jeannie, I think.
Jeannie, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, and she's like smitten with this dude.
She goes, "I think I'm in love." She actually says that, and then comes the first ever. And we've watched a lot of shows, and we've almost watched this show. But first time we come across where one show takes a shot at Jake and the Fat Man.
Yeah, because they're talking about I can't remember what happens or why he starts engaging with them, but he's like calling them Little Missy a lot, and then saying something about like how they need to pay attention or like or if they don't find things challenging. Or if they don't like challenges, they should just go back to watching Jake and the Fat Man or something.
Which is just weird. And like, it's just Shakespeare, which you learn about in middle school. Like, he's not like introducing them to this whole new world of deep thought. Like, it's just Shakespeare.
I love that there is a giant Shakespeare cutout in the corner of the room.
A huge standee of William himself just standing there, which should have played into it. Like, a higher budget could have had that come to life and have Shakespeare kill somebody.
Yeah. It's weird that this is like, so the episode's called Memory Overload, which
his memories are overloaded.
Yeah.
And the second one, there's literal RAM.
Yeah, I guess. I get it. It's just very silly.
I saw a list that ranked this as the 25th best episode of the show.
There were like 40 episodes, so this is right in the middle.
Right in the middle. It does have a sequel episode, which
it does. I saw
tuned.
that, and that episode is directed by Robert Englund. So like,
it's got to be fantastic because he's never directed a bad movie.
I mean, it's called Monkey Dreams, which makes me really excited.
Oh my god.
So anyway, we get our first. I think this is when we get our first Freddy interstitial, because he pops up and he says, "Oh, you think booze can't kill you, huh? Well, a bottle can tear you apart." And he breaks the bottle and he like wields it, even though he's holding it in his knife hand. And
finally, something sharp that he can use.
And he's like, "Booze won't kill the professor, but he'll wish it did." And then he cackles and walks away.
What's impressive is that you have this show called Freddy's Nightmare that has Freddy Krueger in it, but you'll never see him stab anybody on air with his fucking Nintendo Power Glove with knives on it.
I think that like these interstitials, I think they were all filmed probably in like 2 days. Like he probably filmed all of them at once because he's not in the episodes. I
mean, he has like you wouldn't call him in to film literally less than 40 seconds.
No, it's like in this 45-minute episode, he is probably on screen as Freddy Krueger maybe 2 minutes.
Right. And like in the first one, when something happens in a dream, because this kind of happens in this one, it turns out it's actually Freddy. That's not what is happening in any of these 2 episodes.
That's disappointing. I think that the two segments, like they would have been ramped up if we had seen Freddy in those dreams at any point.
Well, what this supposes is that in the town that Freddy haunts, that not only can if you are young enough, can Fred Krueger come into your dreams and cause you misery and kill you, but if you're also an adult, there's also other unrelated to Freddy dream horror happening to people.
This is this is like Haddonfield and Halloween Ends. It's the town that's bad.
You just spoiled Halloween Ends for everybody.
Nobody gives a shit. I didn't spoil it. It's fine. Not like Corey shows up in this episode. So the two girls, Jeannie and Barbara, are walking along, and Jeannie is like, "Oh, I want to get tutored by this professor. He's so like dreamy." And you're like, "This drunk idiot is dreamy."
It's the most fascinating person she's ever met.
Oh, man, I'm wondering if she must be the lead of Monkey Dreams.
they have to bring her back. She's so comically horny in this for awful people, and to have her not be the main character of either episode, and spoiler, she figures into the kind of recurring nightmares that our main character in this episode is having, but that's just in his head. He knows her well enough from like one episode to relive her in character in his head. And maybe that's why Barbara is completely different in this episode than the other one, is that he's only taught her once and doesn't know her character and assumes she's something. But
maybe like that's actually an interesting way to think about it. Like he's interpreting her as different than she actually is. Maybe I'm giving them a little bit too much. You're definitely doing some work for the show, I think, with that interpretation.
We realized what was going on in this episode. Probably we started figuring it out about 1 minute into its figure, like what's going, like something was up.
Yeah.
And then we figured the turn pretty quickly. But what I love early on in this episode is that he does this little trick at the start of the class to grab their attention by pretending to be a drunk and doing something, but he's actually a drunk.
No, he is a lunatic. They see him in the hallway talking to himself
about poetry.
About poetry. They do. Now that in hindsight, I realize they gave away what they were doing very early on. Like I didn't put that together
it's
right
Chekhov's
away.
poem.
Yes. So he's sitting there talking about poetry to himself, just staring off into the distance. And then we cut to him asleep in his house, drunk off his ass.
You're really underselling the fact that he talks to himself and then he comes.
Oh, you're right. He does. He does stand there in the hallway and like tenses up and goes, ah.
Like I was trying to figure out what they were going to do with that, but then it cuts away. He just jizzes in his pants. It's straight from the Lonely Island video. He just
he can't control it. So I mean, I think that just made Jeannie want him more.
She does come back, unless that is also part of his dream, where he's dreaming that this woman is interested in him and comes to his house.
Maybe you're right. The whole thing might be a fucking dream. It's hard to say. Like, we don't know what is real and what isn't, because there's nothing that really like fully gives away when it's a dream or when it isn't. Like, you don't turn into like a very like suddenly everything is garishly colored and lighted and it's all pink and green and blue and you're like, oh, okay, this is clearly a dream now. Like, nothing really tells you when it's a dream and when it isn't. You just sort of realize like, oh, it's a dream, because this wouldn't be happening in reality.
He goes and teaches a class inside his dream.
That's right.
Where our side characters, who are one of the main characters, second part, have interactions that have nothing to do with him, but would also not have happened because he did not show up.
It's very similar to our episode last time on Boy Meets World, where Sean is dreaming up things that he's not witnessing.
Yeah, it's very odd. Like I always am interested in stuff like that. It's easier to do the twists if you don't really make it internally consistent.
Yes.
But like, yeah, like he goes to teach a class where he's very sober and doing well. Clearly that does not happen. This entire episode takes place with him on a couch drunk.
Well, I wonder if that's a thing that like a broader thing that just happens in dream episodes of television series, like where they try to trick you into not realizing that it's a dream. Like, if we stuck with him the entire time and didn't see any other characters, then we would know faster that it's a dream. But also, it's a Freddy Krueger show, so of course there's going to be fucking dreams in it. Like, well, they're not tricking us.
He's being punished with this recurring thing he's going through.
Yes. So
maybe by Freddy. It's not really clear why Freddy would do this to him or have the power to do this
or care.
Or care. Maybe it's God.
But it's not a child. It's not a child of Springwood unless he is, and we don't know that. Like, it's just one of those weird things.
Here's the thing. Freddy's a patriot.
That's right. Freddy was mad that he deserted the military. He's like, I'll show you, bitch.
Frederick Q. Krueger is a patriot. No question about it. If you asked Marjorie Taylor Greene, She doesn't know who Q is, and who Freddy Krueger is, but she knows in her heart that it's a patriot.
The liberal Democrats burned up that man without a trial.
Without a trial, Antifa killed him. I'm sorry, Antifa, because we got to say it so that it does not sound like it's anti-fascist.
We're supposed to be guaranteed trials in America, and they just went and burned him up.
Burned him up for what? For what? Liking children? He was just trying to protect the children.
He was trying to infiltrate the pedo ring and ferret out all the good people, and they realized what he was doing, and so they pinned it all on him and burned him alive.
The lizard people.
So we get to the big star of this episode, like an actual actor that you've heard of who has done things besides Robert Englund. Kyle Chandler is in this episode. As one of probably one of his first couple roles, I would imagine. Like it's fairly early on. This is 89, I think. So probably hadn't done a ton at that point. Like this is actually, let's see, this is his fifth thing that he's credited with. So he had done his first thing as a TV movie in 1988 where he played Skinner. And then he did a couple TV movies in 1989.
He played Grunt in China Beach.
At China Beach. We may be covering an episode of that at some point. It's very funny that he plays a military deserter in this 1989 episode of Freddy's Nightmares and then plays Private William Grinner in Tour of Duty. In 1990. So, he realized he made a mistake and he decided to do a show where he plays a military man and doesn't leave. But yeah, pretty early on in his career, and he pops up here playing Chuck.
I wish there was more of a connection between, like, he does Freddy's Nightmare and does Friday Night Lights. He should have done Friday the 13th.
Yeah, he should have done Freddy's Night Lights.
Freddy's Night Lights. He
went
against the franchise.
Freddy Night Lights is a great product that needs to be sold. It's just a nightlight with Freddy Krueger on it.
That has to be like on Etsy right now.
That absolutely exists. I'm going to look it up really quick. Freddy Night Lights. This great pun that, yes, there's a ton of Freddy Night Lights.
Fantastic. I mean, it's more popular than Black Adam is, which is not very popular.
But Freddy's Night Lights didn't disrupt the hierarchy of the DC cinematic universe.
It's really your cinematic universe shouldn't be really hierarchy should not be upended by something so mid.
So Kyle Chandler shows up here as Chuck, and they have a very funny conversation where he's like, "It's me, Chuck. Chuck, I didn't recognize you."
Yes, so like your first clue something's up is that here's this young man that he's willing to bring in and then he protect, yet at first, while drunk, he does not recognize him.
Yes.
But then like this person who does not recognize him at first glance or second glance or third glance is the first person he would go to protect him from the military police.
Yes. So Chuck comes in and he's been beaten up. You can see some scratches on his face. And he says, "Hey, I've been having these weird dreams. And you have to protect me from my father because I'm deserted the military. And I've had these weird dreams where I'm getting chased by military police, and we see this dream where he gets captured by them, and one of them is about to hit him in the face with a baton, but suddenly a general walks up,
a major dad.
A major dad. This turns out to be Chuck's father, and he says, you were going to hit him in the face, weren't you?" And he goes, "Don't do that. Hit him in the stomach so it doesn't show." And they proceed to beat him up. And he recounts this dream to Professor Wyndham. Did they say Professor Wyndham's name earlier, or is it much later that they reveal what his name is?
I think it's much later because they make a big point of saying Professor Charles Wyndham.
Yes. So, I mean, we can kind of spoil it. That basically this whole thing is that he is remembering himself as a young man and interacting with him. and at a certain point starts to, which I don't really get what they're doing here, but starts to change into a better version of himself. So he suddenly stops drinking.
He starts drinking that earlier that afternoon, and he's instantly better.
Yes, he starts dressing better. Like they have a scene of him back in the classroom teaching, and he's wearing a suit and is very put together. And at the same time, Chuck starts devolving and he starts drinking. And there's one scene where he says, "I've misplaced something, and I've never done that before. And we used to make fun of you for doing that." And then he goes and looks at himself in the mirror, and his teeth have turned yellow, and grimy.
It's like somebody said, people won't get what we're doing unless we have the character tell us.
Kyle Chandler with his bad teeth looks like when Kramer on Seinfeld started smoking cigars all the time.
We thought at this point, like, we weren't sure what it was. We thought maybe he was taking this kid in and now he's robbing him of his youth. Like,
yes.
Like he's becoming younger, and
but it wouldn't have made any sense if that were the case.
But the scene would also make more sense in that sense than it does in what actually happens. There's nothing about what this part one is about that makes sense.
No, it like literally doesn't. It doesn't make any sense. But so eventually, it all kind of it comes together. Like we see earlier when Chuck first shows up that Professor Wyndham goes over and pulls out a framed photo of Chuck's dad for some reason, which we don't understand why he has at first. And he's like, "So we meet again. We're going to do battle over the soul of your son."
Which, once again, doesn't make any sense. I mean, it makes sense why he has the photo kind of in the end.
Yes.
But like, what is his battle in these this time loop that he's in?
I honestly don't know, because like, so we get another dream of young Chuck where his dad shows up and apologizes and says, "Hey, you don't have to be like me. The fact that you're trying to do your own thing, you want to write poetry, that means that, you're your own man, and I respect you for that. And I think that this deserves a celebration. So let's have a drink." And he takes one drink and immediately turns into an awful asshole who starts slapping his son around.
There is a lot of points in this episode where it could seem like an allegory about fighting with your dad, about not being having enough masculinity,
yes,
or simply a homosexual child dealing with a dad who does not understand that.
Yes.
But it never goes all the way.
Well, because they do allude to it, because Chuck, when he's talking with Professor Wyndham, so he's talking to himself, Professor Wyndham is like, "Look what I found." And he pulls out a piece of paper and he's like, Chuck's like, "Oh, this is one of my old poems." And then he's like, "I wish that my father liked poetry and felt the way that you did about it." He thinks that poems should only be written by women, which is like kind of leaning into that thing that you were talking about of like, the dad thinks that his son might be gay because he doesn't want to be in the military and he wants to write poetry.
Right. And I mean, there's also parts earlier where he takes in this young man and he's a professor, and he's trying to protect him from his dad, and who doesn't understand what his son wants to do in academia and stuff. But instead, it's about here's the thing, like the twist coming that it's the major shows up. The Chuck has begun drinking while Charles has been cleaning up for an afternoon. And Charles is going to go to Europe. He's going to go see Shakespeare's hometown. He's going to do all this stuff.
Yeah, and he's been promoted to the head of the College of English at Bern in Switzerland. So he's just like gotten this huge promotion.
I mean, at least his dreams have some nice things.
Yes.
He had one good day at work where he was a wolf with an animal with his nice suit
he's
on.
like, he wears this suit and he's like, "I'm an animal in this suit," and everybody cheers.
Yeah, but
which is definitely a dream thing that you would dream up.
Yes. But Chuck tells him, we won't make it in time. We won't make it to Europe. We won't make it to UK because the military police are almost here. I can feel it in my bones. And then we hear knocking at the door. He hides Chuck in the closet. And it turns out it's Dad.
Yeah.
Dad shoots Chuck, and then mocks him while he dies on the floor.
Wait. You're going too quickly because we have to talk about how weak Professor Wyndham is in this moment where the general comes in. He's like, you don't respect your son or whatever. He's like, where is my son? And he's like, I can't tell you. And then he slaps him and he's like, he's in the bedroom. He just gives it up immediately.
He does not like being slapped. He would not do well in Dana White's slap fighting promotion that he's opening up, which is a thing.
Oh, of course
I believe it has the word white power slap, which is a really bad name.
No, don't. Yeah, rethink that maybe. Like that's on the level of Fast and the Furious race wars being a thing in the first movie.
Yeah, it's bad. It's a bad name.
I like that. Like when Chuck comes out, he's like, "You coward! You gave me up immediately."
He did.
But yes, Chuck gets shot because his dad is like, you're better off dead, and he basically shoots him. He falls on the ground, lays there silently while his dad says, "Stop whining," and then Chuck vanishes, and it's finally revealed officially that Wyndham is Chuck. That was like a young version of himself, and his father is the general, and his father, talks down to him and basically alludes to the fact that Chuck deserting the military killed his father somehow.
So, and then he goes and looks up, finds that picture again, and it says, "To Chuck from Dad, our family's next hero."
Love Dad. And it's the most stern looking photo I think I've ever seen. He just looks angry. And you definitely got to do this for your daughter for Christmas this year.
A picture of myself looking disappointed, but saying "Love Dad."
I love that. That's such a good idea. She's going to hate it, and she's going to tell you once again that you're not funny, but she is wrong. I love her, but she's wrong.
But also, so his guilt is over his dad dying, but would he be punished in this way by Fred Krueger if this is what is happening? If he wasn't, like, somehow the gunfight should have happened and he killed his dad.
Yes, I think that's what it should have been. He should have tried to intervene from his dad killing Chuck and like tried to stop him, and then that caused him to die. And like he shoots his dad, but Chuck also gets shot, and Chuck disappears, and then he realizes, me deserting killed my dad, or what? Like they could have figured it out, but like that's how it should have gone down.
Broke his heart is, I guess, what we're supposed to think. But like, it's so muddied and so like, haha! Aren't you impressed that it was a twist in him all along? It's like, no, it doesn't quite make sense. To me, if you wanted to combine the episodes, and we'll get to that in a second, how this works. His dad being the general who eventually starts up his own credit rating company and hangs out with Shaq. We would finally figure out how they became friends.
That's right. Well, so like he wakes up from this dream back in his ratty apartment with booze everywhere.
Very drunk in the morning.
Looking like shit. Yeah, looking like shit. And he gets a knock on the door, and it's the two women from class. It's Barbara and Jeannie. And they are there because apparently the school told them that if his office is closed, they can just come to his apartment, which you cannot do that.
No, I went to college less than 10 years after this. That would never happen.
No.
Never, ever,
you
ever,
will never
ever
reveal where your professors live because that's not smart. So anyway, Barbara is there to help her friend Jeannie ask for help.
I didn't get the sense that I got the sense that they didn't know each other when they met in that first class.
It's weird because they are talking to each other as if they're like, they've not talked about why they're in that class together at all. But like, I think it's just for us, the audience, to kind of get an idea.
Jenny or Jeannie or whatever her name is, like says, "You aren't an English major, are you?" So she doesn't know what Barbara's.
No. Yeah, Barbara's a computer criminal, as we'll soon learn. But
well, she tells her what her job is, so that she does not know what her job is. So they are now apparently fast friends after not really agreeing with each other about stuff.
Yes.
Other than this redhead who I sat next to is horny for this teacher and thinks that if he tutors me, she could get laid by him by session 2.
Yeah, she wants that whiskey dick, I guess.
Seeing him drunkenly come in the hallways did nothing to stop her from coming to his house with her friend.
I can't wait till he does that to me. So they show up and he's a real asshole to them, of course, because she's like, I was hoping that you might be willing to tutor my friend Jenny here. And he's like, what are you, her interpreter? And he's like, I can't help you. I can't even help myself. And then he slams the door in their faces and he goes and sits down and cries at his table until there is another knock at the door, and he answers it, and it's Chuck again, and everything starts over. They don't recognize each other at first, and he pops in and says, hey, you need to help me. I'm having a hard time. I deserted the military. And Wyndham slowly realizes, oh, this is happening again. And then we cut to Freddy, who says, I'm the head of the class, and the professor is a dunce, which doesn't make any sense. And he then reveals that Wyndham has to live this 10,000 times or until he dies, whichever comes first.
An interesting thing.
Yeah, and in the background, there is like this weird, skewed, crooked blackboard that has written, I deserted the military over and over again.
Once again, Freddy, a patriot.
Yeah. He's a patriotic Bart Simpson who's writing this shit on the blackboard. It's such a weird thing that we don't get Freddy in this like nightmare at all. And then he just shows up to tell us like the ending of it.
So in theory, this isn't the first time he's had this dream because he's already a drunk when we meet him. So
I don't know if it's the first time maybe it is the first time because
otherwise he has to teach these two women in class again. That's gonna be so fucking awkward. He's still going to work.
I think it has to be the first time, and I think that now maybe he won't see those women again. Because he's starting to realize that at the end of the segment that it's happening again. So that has to be the first time it's happened to him.
Fantastic. Well, let me my calculator out here.
So 9,999 more times of that.
So he has to do this for about 27 more years.
I mean,
if it's taking
still
one
be
day,
alive.
if it takes one day per cycle.
Sure.
I mean, the actor's still alive today, and it's been over 27 years since this episode aired.
That's right. So he might still be out there doing stuff. I mean,
he might be finally over it. Freddy's like, you've paid your penance to America. You are now free, and now I'll go after different agents of the deep state.
Yeah, that actor, we might see him again at some point because he is in an episode of Baywatch Nights. He's in an episode of Wing Commander Academy, which I didn't even know was a show.
I bet he plays a professor in that, and it's somebody they could not afford.
Oh my God, there was an animated Wing Commander show.
You know what the most boring movie on the planet is?
Wing Commander.
God damn, that movie doesn't do anything.
He's also in an episode of Walker, Texas Ranger, episode of Silk Stockings, some TV show called Nightstand, which sounds good. And apparently he played the dad on Weird Science.
That he does play have that father you don't like look about him.
Yeah. So we may end up seeing him again. Oh, he's also in one of the Amityville movies.
Maybe we'll see him 10,000 more times.
Oh, and he's in 2 episodes of The Littlest Hobo.
There's a voice. Keeps on calling me 10,000 times. So
But,
we
yeah,
now
we'll get to that one.
transition smoothly into part 2 of this episode, because every
Yeah.
episode has 2 stories of terror.
Yes.
And this one is crazier.
This one is wild, and it is much. This is kind of the reason I think that we picked this one, because this episode in particular, because of the tagline for it. So on IMDb, this one is Memory Overload. It says, in part 1, an alcoholic professor helps a former student. Okay. And in the second part, a woman's computer begins talking to her.
Yeah, and that is what happens.
And according to IMDb, apparently this one aired on November 5th, not October 30th.
This is consistent with our ability to figure out what day anything aired back in the 80s.
Yeah. Apparently, according to IMDb, the 4th episode of season 2 was actually the Halloween episode, which was on October 29th. And apparently, that does have something to do with Freddy Krueger in it. So we fucked up, but maybe we didn't, because this episode is fucking wild. This segment, anyway. So we get a start with a voiceover by a computer. This computer talking about how it is a computer for a computer credit union.
Yeah, it's doing a film noir voice.
Yes, it's like a detective in a film noir.
Why? Because
I don't know.
It is never explained.
No, it is definitely not explained. It says that it's working to figure out which employee is dirty. There's 2 employees, Barbara and Millie, Barbara from our previous segment, and the computer was tipped off by one Fred Krueger, who never steers him wrong, so he's been investigating. Which, what?
Now, so he needs to investigate who among these 2 employees are the dirty one. However, we learn later he's been programmed by one of them.
Yes. So yeah, the big twist is that, like, Millie, the seemingly good employee, is actually pretty dirty herself and wants to just get rid of Barbara, who is a piece of shit.
Yeah. So Barbara is a piece of shit, and this is the Barbara who is the friend of the horny girl in the first episode. She is played completely straight and normal, and other than the fact that she does this speech to on a date that she loves Shakespeare, and Shakespeare is the only relief she has from her own miserable existence.
Yes,
she is completely different. She speaks different. She holds herself different, and she's an absolute jerk to everybody.
Yeah, it's very weird. Like, it's a weird.
And then halfway through the episode, her hair changes, so she looks different.
It's a very weird way to do this whole thing, because at least in the last episode that we covered from season 1, those characters were consistent. Like, at least like when we moved from one main character to another, it felt like it was a continuation of the story.
This one, other than she mentions that she works at a computer credit company in the first episode, and in the second episode mentions that she likes Shakespeare, there's nothing in common with them.
No, it's so strange.
But there almost needs to not be, because they're in tone completely different. And this one is absolutely bonkers, because I can't figure out one of the things about a Nightmare on Elm Street situation is that the nightmares have to be crazy and terrifying and scare you there's also a flip side of what's happening to you in reality.
Yes.
And like, it's supposed to what is happening? Like, we're supposed to kind of lose when the character falls asleep. So we're surprised when the craziness happens, but oh no, they've fallen asleep. In this case, A, it's not a kid. B, it's, besides computer saying that Fred Krueger tipped him off, there's really nothing Freddy about this. And 2, there's really no discernible reality of, is she dreaming certain things? Is she going crazy? Or is she actually, spoiler, sucked into the computer? Because it doesn't matter, because the results are all the same. And we don't know why and where the line is. And the episode has no interest in telling us that. And thus I sit there at the end of it going like, what the fuck even happened? Because you want to be at the end of a thing like this, you want to sit back and go, oh, I figured out where the line was and what actually happened.
Yeah.
When the story isn't interested in that and it's just interested in cheating and tricking you, you can't do that.
So there's a good, like, I haven't seen all of them yet, but like, there's a good example of this in like the Tales from the Crypt are kind of like this on some of them. The new, at least for the first segment of the new Cabinet of Curiosity show, the Guillermo del Toro anthology show, like the first episode of that has this very sort of EC Comics-y kind of vibe of like this person is the victim or the architect of their own downfall, which this kind of has, but like it's just so strange that you kind of lose track of what you're supposed to be what you're supposed to understand.
Yeah, but the imagery in this one is funny. I mean, it's
very good.
I guess it's trying to say like make a shot at credit bureaus because once again, Freddy Q. Krueger does not like the global elite and their how they control
the banking system,
the banking system, the global monetary systems, corrupt, run by a certain ethnic group. He does not agree with because he's a Christian and a patriot.
So we got to talk about this. So Barbara and Millie, they work at this place. Barbara is the supervisor. Millie is kind of the lower level sort of tech person who has to handle a lot of the actual computing involved. Barbara doesn't want to learn it because basically Millie's doing it all, so she doesn't need to learn it. Is her kind of idea on this whole thing.
If you work in an office, you have this person even now.
Oh, you absolutely do. And so, but we do get some stuff. We do get some great stuff with Barbara interacting with customers, basically saying like, well, there's nothing I can do and can't really help you. And you should have paid and you should have done this and you should have done that. And I can't change your score. It's all fucked up. But then we get her talking to her mom, who is the teacher from the Peanuts cartoons.
Her mom lives in SimCity and she speaks in Simlish.
Yeah, she's like, we hear her over the phone and she's telling her about how she's changed her her credit score, and we just hear her mom going.
She's ruining her credit buying hats.
Yes, apparently.
They couldn't find something bigger for her to buy that would ruin her credit. Hats.
Yeah.
She works in tables?
Yes. Tables is how she makes her living, and she spends all of her table money on hats.
I like that this is like in one idea, this is her talking to the people and having no sympathy for them. It's very Scrooge, right?
Yes.
It's very Scrooge in A Christmas Story. Or The Christmas Carol. Or The Christmas Story, where he shows up and he won't give a loan to the little kid who wants a gun. But
maybe that's a subplot in the new A Christmas Story Christmas movie that's coming out later this year.
I can't wait for Scrooge to not give him a loan to buy the BB gun. But also it has this kind of tinge they kind of walk away from of, I can't help you. The computer is making that decision. Where we're in the late 80s, where we're worried about we're taking all our humanity away from decisions about stuff like this and giving it to the soulless computer whose understanding we could never really fathom, right? The Skynet is in charge of our credit score. And now we realize it's just that the credit companies are basically scams and can fuck with us. Mm-hmm. They're the same. They're basically the same people who are trying to sell us old people insurance.
So, she's doing this. She's a real asshole, of course. And the computer. Actually, I guess first when we get Millie basically saying like, you shouldn't be changing your mom's score. You shouldn't do that. And Barbara basically like gets mad at her and says, like, I like your ethics, but you shouldn't apply them to work, which is strange. And so then the computer tells her that she's under arrest for computer tampering. And she kind of imagines herself in like this rundown, gnarly jail. And she gets thrown into a cell. And then there's a computer inside the cell that is a woman and like says, you better be nice to me if you want to survive in here.
It's very Caged Heat, which would have been big at the time. For whatever reason, Millie in the dream is much larger than she is.
They put her in like a weird padded suit underneath her prison guard uniform.
She's just very large in the shirt area. If you ever come across an ad on Twitter with Rashida Jones where she's wearing a giant shirt for reasons that are unknown, it's kind of like that, but amped up a little bit.
So she kind of snaps out of it and goes, gets a customer, Joe Boyette. The computer tells us his name. The computer is narrating this whole thing like it's Ron Howard in Arrested Development, because in this segment, the computer's telling us about Joe Boyette, who shows up and he's like, hey, this guy did some work for me, this plumber. I didn't pay him because he did a bad job and it ruined my credit. Is there anything I can do to fix it? And she's like, well, you should have paid him. And he's like, I know, but I didn't. And I feel bad about it. So I'm trying to fix it. And she's like, well, there's nothing you could do. Can't change it for 3 months. That's just how it is. And he notices her Shakespeare medallion, her Romeo and Juliet medallion, which is just two hands reaching out to each other. And I was like, I don't know what that is. Maybe this was an actual thing in the 80s that I don't know about. Maybe there was a Shakespeare craze and they made these medallions for it, but like she's like, oh yes, it is. And she talks about her love of Shakespeare and how it's like the best thing in the world and how it gives her, it's a respite from her shitty day. And the computer says, there's no way he'll fall for that line. And he's like, I love Shakespeare. And then the computer says he fell for that line.
The computer apparently not in on this scheme that this man is, because this is a scheme.
Yes. It's all a fake. It's all a big like trick, and the computer is in on it, sort of, but maybe it's been programmed to not know that it's in on it.
Maybe it just wants to make its own narration more interesting in between talking about how it wants to hit on a Mac computer.
That's right. It does want to hit on a Mac computer and show it its hard drive.
Weird.
Which if you were to apply that to a man, it's basically saying, I want to hit on a hot woman and pull my dick out.
That's not, have you gone on social media?
I mean, true. Fair.
People are stupid.
But yeah,
this is really odd in that, so they go on a date.
They do go on a date and they make out throughout the entire thing, which when you understand what is happening, it's like, wow, what a good guy Joe is to agree to do this.
So Joe is trying.
Also not necessarily a good guy. I guess I should retract that statement slightly.
I guess. It is kind of hinted that they go all the way.
Yeah, they definitely do.
Because Millie asks her about the date later, and we later find out that this is Millie's brother.
Yes. So Millie. This is really. Honestly, it's really fucked up. Regardless of like.
Millie's plan is, hey, can you go fuck my boss?
Can you fuck my boss and like help me drive her crazy?
Nothing she has done. Like, I don't think what part of her job of her plan was, I'll make my boss think she's being pulled into the computer. How did she pull that one off?
Okay, so what is Millie's plan? So Millie's plan is to get Barbara to date her brother so that she will fix her brother's credit score, but using Millie's code, trying to blame it on her so that Barbara then gets caught and then gets arrested and goes to jail?
Yes.
So that Millie can get in, so that Millie can be put in charge?
Yes. So if you remove the supernatural parts of it.
Yes.
She is going, She apparently knows that Barbara is so petty that if she stood up by Millie's brother, who Millie asked her to fuck her boss,
Yes.
if she stood up, she would in petty form go in the computer and destroy his credit, and then if he decides to forgive him, that if he tells her just go in the computer and fix it, and she does know that the
okay, wait a minute. So now that you're putting it all out there like that, I'm going back on my statement of him being a pretty good guy because he lets his credit get fucking ruined.
Well, his credit is bad in the first place,
but it gets even more ruined.
I mean, he would have to intentionally not pay a plumber to set this all into motion.
No, he fucked up there, but then she ruins it even further. So he had to go into this knowing I might fuck your boss and also my credit might be completely destroyed.
Right. I mean, but it does get fixed, but they do get caught. So I would assume that they would. How much would they reverse once they catch? Because they know that because when interrogating her when she's caught, they would know that she's the one who destroyed in the first place. But also, his base one when he came in would have been bad no matter what.
And then the cops would eventually put it to, like, the computer security firm that works at this company would eventually put it together that, like, hey, she messed with your brother's credit score and then she used your account to fix your brother's credit score. How does this all work? How did this happen?
Maybe they have different last names and it's impossible to figure out who's related. I mean, he introduces himself as her sibling by coming in and having a romantic kiss with her.
Brings her flowers and kisses her on the cheek. You're right. So,
and like, until he says sis, we are supposed to believe for a second that they are a couple and that's why they're in on it. Instead, they are siblings and in on it. I don't know why they chose one over the other.
They might still be a couple. So okay. So they go out to dinner.
Okay, we have given the whole overview of the episode.
We have.
However, there is a significant chunk of this episode where Barbara keeps getting pulled into the computer.
That is true. So Barbara and Joe go out. They have a good time.
A great time.
She decides that she's going to fix Joe's credit somehow. And he asks her out to lunch and he doesn't show up. So she gets really mad and proceeds to ruin his credit.
I love that it does not set off any warnings or any problems with the law to fix someone's credit, to ruin someone's credit, but it does to fix it.
Yes, though it's weird because she fixes it first with no issue, and she's been fixing her mom's credit for a long time, and apparently there's been no issue. And then she ruins his credit, and there's no issue. And then it's only when she uses Millie's code to fix his credit again that it raises some red flags.
She does say that if she waits 3 months, I think she can do it without penalty.
Yes. So I think it's maybe just this guy's credit yo-yoing all over the place that triggered some sort of internal review.
No, the computer tells.
Oh, you're right. The computer is conspiring against her. So because it's been programmed to.
Yes, computer has a thing for Millie and the Mac.
But she programmed it to do that.
Somehow.
So Barbara's mad. But Joe shows up and he apologizes. And he says, hey, my mother got really sick and I wasn't able to call you and I had to go deal with that.
My mother, who was also Millie's mother.
Yes. But the best line is one of the best lines. There is a really good line here later on that Joe has. But Barbara's good line in this one is, I'm not the vindictive type, but also when you didn't show up to lunch, I ruined your credit.
I mean, we don't like to think the worst of ourselves. And labels are so hard.
So he runs off, but like she gets upset, but then from the computer, she hears Joe's voice and he's like, I'm trapped inside. So
she immediately goes, yes.
She's like, okay. And he's like, come inside and get me. And then a fist punches through her screen and pulls her inside the computer.
It's the start of a music video from MTV from 1987.
This is the updated AHA video.
Yes. And then she goes in there and it's do 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 do
Yes.
do 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 as she goes around and around a circular set.
Yes, she's inside the computer. It looks like a Nick Arcade kind of backdrop. She gets accosted by a bunch of computer programs played by customers that she told too bad earlier in the episode.
This is all in theory not actually happening, except for it. Does this happen or not? Is she?
I am not sure, honestly,
because this happens twice. And the second time we cut to her outside the computer going crazy.
Yes,
but
then
what happened to make her go crazy? What is causing her to have these nightmares?
It's
is it Freddy?
Unclear. It must be Freddy. He must be conspiring with this computer because it says that they're working together at the beginning.
But because she's an adult, or because he's got prior commitments, he contracted it out to other people.
That's right. Freddy is too busy killing. As we learned in the last episode of this, we covered he'd killed 600 kids or something at some point. So he was busy killing some kids, and he had to farm this one out to his computer friends. I'll let my computer buddy do this one. Hey, Jeeves, can you handle this?
He did ask.
Yes, he asked Jeeves to make this woman go insane. So she's inside. She finds Joe inside the computer, trapped behind some glass, and she's like, well, I'll just delete this glass from the programming, and then we'll get you out. But she doesn't know how to use the computer, of course, and she fucks up, and Joe disappears. So she comes back to the real world somehow. We just kind of cut back to her being back in the real world, and she calls Joe to apologize. And they go to dinner. And Joe was pretty pissed off last time, but he agrees to meet her for dinner. And then he has what is probably the best line of the episode, which is, nothing has changed. You destroyed my credit rating.
Yeah, I mean, that is what, it's not really about him either. It's about his business. It's about the economy.
Yeah. So he's like, you got to change it back. And she's like, well, I can't, because if I use my own code, I might go to jail, even though I've already done it twice before. This time, 3 times. There's 3 strikes, basically. They let you change whatever credit scores you want in whichever direction you want twice. But if you do it a 3rd time, you go to jail.
Yes. Well, I mean, that's the rule of 3s.
That's right.
That's literally how the government works.
So he says, why don't you use Millie's code to fix it? Because she's like, I only know one other code, and that would be Millie's. And then if he does that, if she uses Millie's code to fix the score, then they can move on with their lives together, because he sees this as being something very big and good, and he wants that to happen, but he can't do it unless his credit score is fixed, because they can't afford to pay for their big wedding if he doesn't have good credit, I guess.
Makes sense.
So
going a little fast, but makes sense.
That's right. So Barbara decides she's going to do this. She changes his score using Millie's code, and she calls him up and she's like, hey, I did it, but Millie hasn't shown up yet. So I'm really worried, because if she doesn't come to work, then they'll know that she didn't do it and it was probably me, and then I'll get in trouble. So she's trying to remain calm, but then she gets a call from Millie that says, I'm in the emergency room and I might have a broken leg.
And this is very funny, where she says, how do you know your leg is broken? Lots of people come to work with broken legs.
Yeah, and so she's freaking out now because she knows that they're going to know that she did it. And as soon as she hangs up the phone, the computer security guy comes in and says, hey, we traced some tampering to Millie's computer, and we need to know where she is. And she's like, well, she just left for a dentist appointment, and I don't know when she'll be back. And he's like, all right, well, tell her don't tell her that I was looking for her, but I need to know when she returns so we can question her. So now Barbara's kind of freaking out a little bit because she doesn't know what she's going to do. They're going to eventually trace it back to her. But the computer tells her, no, just come inside here and you can delete the evidence. So now she goes back into the computer like she's a superhuman samurai cyber squad member. And she tries to replace Millie's file with some other file.
We also see it's the inside of Millie's head, because one of the files is her opinion about her
That's
about
right.
Barbara.
Yes.
So
we can apply. This isn't Millie's head. This is just a file that she has on her computer. She just writes in her journal about how much she hates Barbara.
That's possible, but also it could be that set people don't know what the fuck they're doing.
I'll give the show this amount of credit, that she just has an online journal where she's like, that fucking Barbara.
Millie, inventor of my diary space,
of LiveJournal,
of the blog.
So she goes in there. She tries to take this little this drive that she's been given by one of the other programs to try to plug it into this thing, and it doesn't work. Something happens. It's kind of unclear what happens. There's like a flash of light, and like she's been blown up like she's in a Looney Tunes cartoon. Her clothes are all tattered and her hair is messed up now. And we cut back to the real world where she is beating on her computer, screaming, saying that she'll kill it. And then she gets hauled away by the computer security guys. And then we see Millie, who I guess has been promoted, and is talking to Barbara's mother on the phone and says, yes, I do think 5 years in a penitentiary is a little harsh.
It's funny, but I like that when the boyfriend was on the phone, he didn't get the Simish talk, but it must run in Barbara's family that when they talk over the phone.
I mean, I think that that's just what Barbara's mother sounds like.
But Barbara gets the same treatment when she calls Millie.
Oh, that's right.
It's genetic,
apparently. So that's just what Barbara hears. She just hears, and Joe was the only one who cut through that noise. this man who was very interested in her. So Joe comes in now with flowers, and we think, oh, he's dating Millie now for some reason. Maybe he only wants women who can fix his credit. But no, as we revealed, it's he's Millie's brother. And it turns out that she programmed her computer to drive Barbara insane somehow. She knew this would work. And the computer says, I love you to Millie.
He's also in love with her, which is odd.
And she's like, you're not so bad yourself. And then they walk off. Her and Joe walk off together, arm in arm, like a couple, which is weird. And then the computer says, I'm going to go off and find this Mac and show it my hard drive. And then we cut to Freddy, who says, this is sort of the wrap-up lesson of the episode, to always hire someone dumber than you. And in your case, you punks, that means someone brain dead.
I like that he hates everyone who watches the show.
Yeah. And then he laughs and says, aha, kill me.
It's just so tremendously bad that I love it. Because there's not a single interstitial we've watched yet where it's even remotely clever or funny or scary. It's just the worst shit. And I never want it to be good.
No, there's no way it can be good, honestly. It's so silly. It's so strange, so silly. It doesn't really make any sense. I don't get what the point of it was. But I wouldn't have it any other way, honestly.
Absolutely. It has to continue to be this way when we watch more episodes, which we almost certainly will.
Yeah, so we talked about it earlier, but in the sequel episode to this one, called Monkey Dreams. In this follow-up to Memory Overload, a gambling addict lab researcher must race to complete his work before his bookie's enforcers show up to collect, which is great. In the second half, another researcher has nightmares about his treatment of a chimpanzee test subject.
Oh, that can't possibly be done well.
No, and both Millie and Jeannie do show up in that episode. So I don't know because in that episode description it's two men. So I'm kind of curious, like where Jeannie and Millie fit into that episode. But like it is interesting that it's the sequel, even though neither of them seem to be the main characters.
It involves computers.
It's pretty good. Like this is a silly episode that goes in places that you wouldn't expect. And honestly, now that I think about it, the inside of the computer is essentially if there were a live action reboot. That's what it would look like.
It's fantastic. Like just this entire thing. These two parts having similar characters who are completely unrelated in their performance of those characters, and why you would team up this episode with this university professor haunted by his family's disappointment in his career choices and his perceived masculinity with this pulled into computer episode. Like you couldn't take two things that have less in common,
yes,
and try to tie them together. The way this show is an anthology makes me think they couldn't find another episode where they either part fit.
Yeah, I think you're probably right. It's like we wrote these two things, we can't figure out we don't have anything else that would go with them, so we'll just put them together and we'll figure it out. Like I think that's really the only thing that it could be. I was just noticing this because I was looking through Joseph Callie's IMDb page. He's the guy who plays Joe, and his like first role was in 1977. He plays Joey in Saturday Night Fever. His last role from 2008 is Saturday Night Fever, the video game, where he plays Joey. Full circle, baby.
Full circle. I mean, that's how you want to do it.
He's also in an episode of 18 Wheels of Justice.
That is the show, and yet at the same time somehow we didn't get a good episode of that.
And Silk Stockings and Murder, She Wrote, which stay tuned for that.
That's coming up for sure. Silk Stockings almost certainly coming up if we can pull ourselves away from these nightmares.
Yeah. Also in an episode of Renegade, which we will definitely be doing. But yeah, I mean, it's like, I think that I said it earlier in the episode, like we have to cover, I think, every one of these at some point. Like I don't know if we will do what I said, which is every other month we will cover at least one of these, which I think we could do. That's enough of a separation between them where it wouldn't get old, but like maybe it'll be a little less frequent than that. But like it's such a fun, stupid show that like I can't
imagine someone making, for whatever your opinion is on current TV and like the dumbest show you've ever seen, which just will be an episode you don't like on some shit. Like it's just your own fucking taste. Like they don't make shows that are just so drizzlingly poor as this, but that are also like entertainingly stupid.
Yes, this perfectly is like, because I'm a big fan. Like on our previous show, PredictoCast, we covered a lot of quote bad movies. I'm a big fan of bad movies. I enjoy the kind of silliness of them. I genuinely like some of them. Like they're poorly made, but they're a lot of fun. And this show I think is like a perfect television sized version of that, like where it's really bad. Like the performances are not good, the storylines are not good, but like there's something very comforting and fun about it that I can't not enjoy it and not recommend it to people. Like you could literally watch probably any episode and have a good time.
Yeah, I mean, like it's one of those ones where we try to go through our shows and pick the episode with the craziest description. Because we want to show an episode that, you know, entertains people, or an episode that informs us about what the show is about, or sometimes it's just fun to going so blind that it just confuses us the entire time. If you're listening and you're like, you guys didn't get the point of the show, you guys don't know the background, it's sometimes intentional. I've never seen a show that has every fucking episode being like, this would be a good podcast.
Yeah.
Like every single goddamn one.
Like we literally have looked through all of these descriptions, and it's like, we are spoiled for choice. Like we could pick any of them and have a good time because they all sound wild. They just all sound crazy. And it's like, oh, of course I want to see how they tie these two random things together.
Speaking of Predictocast and things we liked, bad movies we liked, put a pin in the episode, an episode of Walker, Texas Ranger that has Don the Dragon Wilson in it.
Oh, okay. We definitely will have to do that. One thing that we did not do in our episode with Christy Admiral is we did not place that Boy Meets World episode on the scale of spookiness that we normally do. So normally, you know, we have our little scale where we rate these things, kind of where they land on the weird spooky scale. So that one's just going to be lost to time. We'll never know what we thought of that Boy Meets World episode, but we got to put this episode of Freddy's Nightmares on our scale of spookiness, our scale of weirdness. So I don't remember what we did for the last one. This one definitely, I think, should rank higher, though.
I'm going to give it a 6.
Okay.
Because it has an inside the computer scene. And that made me think of the scene from Superman 3 where the computer attacks the woman and turns her into a robot person. And that scared the bejesus out of me as a kid.
Okay. I think I'll give this one, I think I'll give it a 7, honestly. I think it's just, it kind of blew my mind a couple times. So I think that, this is a good one. This is a very dumb episode. If you're going to it for Freddy Krueger, don't watch it because he's not really in it enough to warrant it. But if you want something very silly that ties together in a weird way, definitely Memory Overload is a good episode of Freddy's Nightmares. Good is, of course, in quotations. It's very, very silly.
I love how many times we said, what the fuck is happening now?
Yes.
Watching this, like where you're just watching along and like all of a sudden, like it amps up another notch and you're like, but why is it amping up a notch?
Yeah, exactly. Like it's so over the top and so great at the same time. Like it's the perfect way to wrap up your Halloween season. So even though it has nothing to do with Halloween whatsoever, and it's not even remotely scary, spend your evening after you finish trick-or-treating watching this episode of Freddy's Nightmares. But until next time, when we're back talking about another weird show, we're going to have to put the spooky season to bed. We're going to have to get back to just the regular weirdness and then gear up for the other weird holiday season that's coming down the pike very soon.
Coming down the chimney.
It's coming down the chimney. Very good. But until then, I've been Josh.
I've been Skinner.
And we want you to keep it spooky and keep it weird out there.
Until Tuesday. Then you can fuck off a little bit.
That's right. Then you go back to normal. But if you'll excuse me, I've got to go ruin my credit by dating my sister's boss. You've been listening to Center of Weirdness. If you like this show, rate and review us wherever you find it, but especially on Apple Podcasts. You can listen to every episode at centerofweird.com, where you can also find all of the old Predictocast episodes. And if you want to get in touch with us to tell us about a show we should cover, hit us up on Twitter at WeirdCenter. As always, thanks for listening.
Be like?
Can't imagine.
Awkward all the time.
Hey, bro, can you do me a huge favor? Oh, yeah, sure. What do you need? Do you need you need me to help you move or like lift a heavy thing up some stairs or something? Oh, no. I need you to come and pretend to date my boss and also maybe fuck her so that we can get her fired and I can get her job. Oh, yeah, sure. No problem. I'm free tomorrow.
I works really bad. Could you like cheer up my boss near performance review time by making her like cum her brains out, just a little bit, brother?
Yeah, she was
also
she was talking at work. She was talking at work once about how she saw this guy cum in his pants in the hallway, and it really like did something for her.
Oh, she's going to a professor's apartment who's a big drunk. Could you escort her? No? Okay, that's a bridge too far, I guess. A little weird. Just listen to her on the phone all night, not understand a word she says.